She found it strange to find a red rose on her son's grave every day. When she set up a camera to see who was visiting him, she was shocked. Hello friend, if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and like the video for more amazing stories. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, Lillian and her son Mike decided to have a picnic. They prepared sandwiches, fruit, and some drinks, put everything in a basket, and headed for the park. When they got there, they found a nice spot in the shade of a tree and began to set things up. While they were eating, the boy started talking about his passion for writing and said he was working on a new short story. His mother, always interested in what her son was doing, asked what the plot was. Mike excitedly began to tell her that it was about a young man who discovers that he has magical powers and finds himself involved in a great adventure to save the world from imminent destruction. Lillian listened attentively and was impressed by her son's imagination. When he finished the story, she smiled proudly and said,
"My son, you're an incredible writer. I love the way you manage to create whole worlds with just words."
He smiled back and said,
"Thanks, Mom. I don't know how I could write without your support. You're my biggest fan."
The two of them laughed and the woman said,
"Of course I am. I'll be here to support you in whatever you decide to do."
They continued to talk and enjoy the picnic, laughing and making plans for the future. Lillian felt grateful to have such a wonderful son and thought that even if nothing else in life worked out, she had everything she needed in Mike. Lillian was a strong and independent woman. After losing her husband to a heart attack, she had to raise her son alone, without anyone's help. Her husband, Pedro, was a successful businessman and they lived a very comfortable life. But the woman wasn't interested in living only for the money. She wanted to raise a loving and responsible son. Mike was an intelligent and kind young man who had just turned 18 and was preparing to go to college. His mother was proud of how the boy had grown and of the relationship they had. They were best friends and shared everything with each other. Once while they were sitting in the living room, the young man asked,
"Mom, why didn't you ever get married again?"
Lillian sighed and replied,
"I've already found the love of my life. Your father was everything I needed, and I couldn't have found anyone like him."
Mike gave a sad smile and just agreed. He knew that there would never be anyone who could replace his father, but he really wanted to see his mother happy again. But Lillian didn't let her sadness get the better of her. She and the boy enjoyed life to the fullest, traveling the world and trying new things. When they were at home, they enjoyed cooking and watching classic movies. His mother also encouraged her son to pursue his dreams. She knew he wanted to be a writer from an early age, so she always presented him with books by authors he admired. A good laptop, a personalized coffee mug, a notepad, and an elegant pen to jot down ideas and inspirations. She took him to literary conferences that he liked and encouraged him to write every day. Being a more reserved boy, Lillian sometimes worried that he would be too dependent on her or that he would feel excluded from the group of people his own age. She didn't want him to feel lonely because she wasn't around when he went to writing school. But Mike always reassured her. She knew that her son was very special and that she had been blessed to have him in her life. She only hoped that she could be a good mother and prepare him for whatever the future held. Their life was full of love and adventure, but since she had already lost her husband, she knew that things could change at any moment because life is unpredictable. She was determined to enjoy every moment with Mike because she had always kept in mind that life is short and precious. But that poor mother wasn't prepared for what fate would put her through. The boy went to college in a nearby town. He still visited his mother every weekend as it was only a 2-hour drive. Lillian was very proud of her son for following his passion for writing, and Mike was happy to have her unconditional love and support. And that weekend when they went to the park for a picnic, it was a sunny summer afternoon and they both had a great time. At dusk, the boy got into his car and drove back to the university. However, in the middle of the way, a drunken, reckless driver invaded the opposite direction and crashed into the boy's car. The impact was so violent that Mike was thrown out of the vehicle and fell to the ground, unconscious. When Lillian received the news of the accident, she felt as if the world had collapsed around her. She rushed to the hospital and found her son in critical condition, hooked up to machines and fighting for his life. The poor mother found herself in a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. She spent the next few weeks by his side, praying that her little boy would recover. Poor woman, she felt every possible emotion: fear, sadness, anger, despair. She couldn't imagine her life without Mike and didn't know how to move on if he didn't survive. Every day was a battle for Lillian as she watched the boy fight for his life. She would talk to him, even if he was unconscious, telling him stories and remembering the good times they had together. The mother couldn't sleep and barely ate, her mind constantly on her son. She felt as if she was losing a part of herself with each passing day and wondered what she could have done differently to prevent the accident, as she felt it was somehow her fault. Unfortunately, to that poor woman's dismay, Mike's fight for life came to an end and Lillian was forced to face what was her worst nightmare. The mother screamed and cried. It was as if all the air had been sucked out of her lungs. She clung to her son sobbing, unable to accept that he was gone. Lillian's pain and sadness were unbearable, and she felt as if she would never be able to smile again. The woman wondered what her life would be like without her beloved Mike, how it would be possible to go on without him. The poor woman was completely lost. After days of not leaving the house, and her seemingly eternal mourning, she began to visit her son's grave every day. She would sit by his tombstone and talk to him as if he were still there. The visits became a ritual that helped her deal with the pain of the loss, although the longing never went away. Lillian would share with Mike how her day had been. She would recall happy moments they had spent together, and always she would shed tears that would wet the earth like rain. The pain was still unbearable, and she often felt as if she couldn't move on. And so, that is how the days of that poor woman were. She woke up, got ready, and went to her son's gravestone, placed fresh flowers on top of the grave, talked, cried, and went home to cry even more. However, one day, as Lillian was walking towards Mike's grave, her eyes caught sight of something she had never seen before. A red rose on top of his headstone. She approached the flower, feeling intrigued, and a little scared at the same time. She looked around, hoping to find someone who could explain the presence of the rose, but there was no one in sight. The mother thought that perhaps someone had left the flower as a sign of comfort or empathy, so she didn't mind the gesture. However, as the days went by, the red rose became a constant presence on the boy's grave. When the other flowers wilted, the rose remained there, always fresh and vibrant. Lillian couldn't explain why someone would bring flowers to her boy's resting place, and wondered if there was something else behind it. She began to wonder who the person was who was leaving the roses there, and that made her uneasy. The red rose became an enigma for that poor mother, something that she couldn't decipher. So she began to visit her son's grave at alternate times, trying to find out who could have left the flower there. However, the more she tried to find out, the more confused she became. It was then that Lillian decided to ask the cemetery staff, but nobody knew anything at all, because they didn't keep watch so that visitors could have privacy. The woman became increasingly restless. She spent nights awake, trying to understand what was going on, whether someone was following her, or whether there was something more supernatural behind it all. That mother's doubts gradually turned into paranoia. She began to dread visiting her son's grave, afraid that someone might be watching her. So, after weeks of this dilemma and becoming increasingly distressed, Lillian decided that she needed to find out the truth. She searched for security equipment and ended up buying a camouflage camera. Her idea was to place it near the grave and finally find out what was going on. It was a struggle to install it, as the woman knew nothing about technology and couldn't hire anyone, as it was clearly a crime. But she was determined to find out everything. She went to the cemetery one evening and spent hours planning the best place to put the camera without being discovered. Finally, she found a strategic place where the camera would be hidden and could record everything without being seen. In a tree next to Mike's tombstone, she was carrying her camera, a toolkit, and a lot of courage. The tree was tall and leafy, with branches strong enough to support her. However, climbing it was a challenge. Lillian was only 42 years old, but she was no longer young and only practiced sport from time to time. But she knew she had to do it. She took a deep breath and concentrated on climbing, camera in hand. It was a difficult and dangerous climb. The woman had to balance on narrow, unstable branches, and the camera almost fell a few times. No one would believe it if they saw a scene like that. However, at last, that determined mother managed to install the equipment. When she finally returned to the ground, she was sweating, panting, and her heart was beating fast. But she felt victorious and also worried, as the camera could be discovered at any moment, and she didn't know what would happen. Still, she was anxious and went home feeling a little nervous, knowing that she was about to discover something that could change her life forever. He left it recording overnight and could barely sleep with anticipation. It was a long night for her. The next day, Lillian ran to her laptop to check the images. She couldn't believe her eyes. Her heart raced when, in the video, the figure of a woman appeared, all in black, with a hat covering part of her face. She left the red rose on Mike's grave, knelt down and seemed to be crying. Lillian approached the screen, trying to see the woman's face, but the image was blurred. She didn't quite know how to process the information. She felt a mixture of emotions such as curiosity, fear, and even hope.
Who is she? What is she connected to my son?
The poor mother couldn't stop thinking about it. She spent days and nights obsessing over that mysterious woman and tried to identify her a million times from the videos. But it was impossible to know who was the person who was leaving the flowers. So, she decided there was no other way. She had to confront her. So, after a week of observing the stranger, Lillian woke up one day, excited and anxious, got ready and went to the cemetery just before the woman was due to visit her son's grave. The mother hid from a distance, waiting for the right moment to confront her, and after some time, the woman was finally there, putting on the red rose and crying. Lillian slowly approached her, examining her closely, without her realizing it, and was surprised to see that she was a younger woman. She looked about 35 years old. She thought she knew that face, but couldn't remember where. But then when the mysterious woman turned to leave and bumped into the boy's mother, she went pale and unresponsive while Lillian screamed.
Who are you? And why are you leaving roses here every day?
She asked with a firm tone. The woman was completely bewildered and looked from side to side, seemingly searching for a way out of the situation. Her eyes were wide and she seemed to feel trapped. However, despite the fear she felt, she pulled herself together before revealing something that mother could never have imagined.
I'm Mike's biological mother,
she said. Lillian choked. Now she recognized exactly the person standing in front of her. It was the same woman who had sold Mike to her as a baby 18 years ago. It turns out that when she was still married to her late husband, Lillian discovered that she couldn't have children due to a condition called polycystic ovarian syndrome. Desperate to become a mother, she looked for all possible options. She underwent various medical treatments. She tried artificial fertilization, even though she knew the chances were very low, and many other procedures. However, after years of trying and failing, she began to lose hope. It was then that through an acquaintance of her husband's, Lillian found out that a girl called Bruna, who was only 17 at the time, was pregnant and looking for someone to raise her baby. Without thinking twice, the woman decided to keep the child. She paid the girl a certain amount and, with the help of a trusted lawyer, legalized the adoption and named the baby Mike. She never told the boy the truth, but she has always loved him as if he were her own biological son. For Lillian, the love she felt for Mike was no less true just because he hadn't been born in her own womb. But that didn't explain how Bruna knew where they lived, or how she knew about the boy's death. Then she clarified.
I know it sounds strange. Mike met me a few months ago, and we started talking. He wanted to know more about my story, and I wanted to apologize for everything I'd done in the past. I really regret selling him, and when I found out he was gone, I came here every day to honor him and ask for forgiveness for everything.
And the poor thing started to cry. Lillian was shocked by Bruna's words. She didn't know how to feel or react to it all. On the one hand, she was happy to know that her son had found his biological mother, as she had always wanted to tell him the truth despite her fear. But on the other hand, she felt betrayed and deceived.
I never knew he was looking for you,
said the boy's mother, trying to control herself.
He told me that he found out he was adopted when he realized that in the family photos, all of you had stickier earlobes and he didn't. So he concluded that you weren't his biological parents. I understand how you feel, but you need to understand that I just wanted to apologize and be present in my son's life, even if it's after his death.
Bruna replied. The two women remained silent for a few moments, looking at each other. Lillian didn't really know what to say, but she was angry, sad, and moved by the woman at the same time. But then a wave of empathy for Bruna washed over her because she was also a mother and knew how difficult it was to deal with the pain of losing a child. She approached the young woman and hugged her, letting her cry in her arms.
I know that nothing I say can make the pain of your loss go away, but I want you to know that I'm here. As a mother, I can imagine how unbearable it is to lose our child, and I think that's what unites us now. Despite our differences, we are both mothers. If you want to talk, cry, or just be silent, I'm here. You're not alone.
Lillian said, comforting her. It was a moment of compassion and mutual understanding between two women who shared the pain of loss. As time went by, Mike's two mothers became closer and closer. Over time, the pain of the loss began to subside and give way to a feeling of gratitude and peace. Lillian felt that she had finally found a way to honor Mike's memory and keep him alive in her heart, and Bruna was at peace with having finally reconciled with the past and the choice she had made. The two women could never replace the role Mike played in their lives, but together they found comfort and companionship in the midst of their pain. The friendship that was born between them was an unexpected gift, but one that brought new meaning to their lives. What do you think about this story? Thank you for watching this video, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.